Hi everybody, it's Shawnee. You can't see me because I'm on the other side of the camera and I'm not ever the important one. The important thing is what you're going to learn today. And so today we're talking about reading stitches and looking at your work and understanding what you've done, whether you've done everything right and you can look back and admire it as Martha tells us to do quite often, or you can look back and go, oh, I have a mistake right there, and you know how to fix it, or at least you know how far back to go. So let's take a look at what we've got on I just made a swatch this morning. I used kind of a big chunky yarn, and my needle is probably a little bit too small, but that's okay. You can still see the work that I've done. So I've cast on. This was just a regular long tail cast on, and I did 2 rows of just knit. And by doing 2 rows of just knit, that gives us 1 ridge of garter. And hey everybody, it's so nice to see all of you. Thank you very much. So this ridge of garter right here, do you see how it kind of, I'm going to use the teacher in me is going to get my pointer out. So you have a stitch on the bottom, a stitch on the top, a stitch on the bottom, a stitch on the top. See? Because for every stitch, for every knit on one side, there's a purl on the other. And so we're looking at some of the purls. Then I continued to do the swatch just in stockinette. And you know this is stockinette because see how we have these little V's all on the same side? When you knit on the knits, you're knitting on the front, and those are the knits, and you purl on the purls, it creates stockinette, okay? So let's take a look at the little tiny pattern that I created, because the pattern here is the same as the pattern that I put on the needle, all right? So what I did, I just knit, and look, I used stitch markers. That's very important. Use your stitch markers. So I have 2 rows of knit, okay? And then right here, do you see how this stitch slants to the left? And this stitch, it's a little hard to read, but it slants to the right. On this side, I slip, slip, knit. And on this side, I knit 2 together. So that's why it's important when you're knitting lace, especially if it's something that is going to be very visible and you're creating a leaf or something like that, you need to be able to really execute, I'm sorry, not this one. It's over here. This is the knit 2 together. You have to be able to execute those stitches in order to make that leaf actually appear. So those of you who went to Block Island with us, remember that Deb Newton told us that lace work is just knitting 2 together and yarning over. That's all it is. There's a lot more involved, but that's basically the main lace stitches, and you just do stuff with it, okay? So the yarn overs create these holes because we've knit 2 together by slip, slip knitting, or knitting 2 together on this side. Do you see how that slants like that? And then I put a regular old knit stitch right down the center, okay? And then I repeated it over here. And then I actually made a mistake over here on purpose. I made 2 mistakes, but we're going to get to the 2 mistakes over here later. So let's take a look at what's on the needle. So you know that these are knits because they have a little V on the bottom, okay? So I've knit 2. But this one, this stitch comes out of 2 stitches. We've got one that slants, and then we've got this one right here. So I know that I've knit 2 together, but since it slants to the left, hey Liz, I'm glad you're here, thank you. Since it slants to the left, I know I've slip, slip knit, and I've got 1 stitch left. Because I got rid of one, I have to add one. Look at this yarn over, y'all. when you look at a yarn over, do you see how it's at an angle? That's how you read a yarn over. So sometimes y'all ask me, well, how do you know I missed the yarn over? And I'm looking at your needle. Well, it's because you don't have this angled stitch on the top. That's how I know, okay? And I can kind of go back and look through. So here is my slip, slip, knit. See how that stitch moves this way? My yarn over, my regular knit stitch, another yarn over, and then this was knit 2 together, but you can hardly see because they're covered up. See that it's this stitch right here underneath. There's this one, and then there's one underneath, okay? And that's where it's knit 2 together. Then I have 2 plain old knit stitches, and then I did it again. So I've got slip, slip, knit, yarn over, regular knit, yarn over, knit 2 together. Then I kind of did something here on purpose so you can see, because quite often those of you who ask me about reading stitches, how do you know? How do you know that's a knit? Well, the knits are V's, but on the front, if we're on the right side, when it's like this, that's a purl, okay? So I've made a couple of mistakes here. I actually slipped this stitch on purpose. And when you look at it, you can see it's real long. It's elongated. On the front, it's not such a problem. Maybe you don't have to fix it. But when you look at it on the back, oh, here it is. Here it is. I was going to say I've lost it already. It's a long stitch. So sometimes when you bring me your work and you ask me to find something, like I don't know what's wrong, I'll look on the back first, because if I look on the back, then I can see what's missing. All right, so let's turn this around. I have one more thing to show you here, and then we're going to move on to some examples, other examples. So when you do those sweaters that have raglan sleeves, sometimes you do an increase where you use a knit front back. Now you can knit front slip back and this won't happen, but if you use knit front back, a purl occurs. Do you see that purl right there? See, these are straight and they come out of a little triangle, but this is a little purl that shows up. That's the knit front back. That's how I read that. So when I'm knitting a raglan sleeve, and I need to know, God, did I increase or not? I look for those knit front back purls, okay? All right, so let's take a look at some other things. Oh, let's do this first though. Let's say you're asking me how many rows of stockinette have I completed, okay? You don't, sometimes people argue, whatever, I'm just gonna let y'all go. You decide what you want, but I'm gonna count. I count the points here, okay? So here is 1 row. Do you see that little V? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I never count what's on the needle because I consider that almost to be like a cast on. A lot of people are different, but that's just me. So that's how you count those. Now let's turn this around. And you would tell me, oh, wow, look at all those purls. Well, this is right, but this is not garter. This is called inverse stockinette, because when you're looking at the back, I didn't create it by purling. Well, I did. This is purling, but it's the back of stockinette is inverse or reverse. What is it? Reverse stockinette. Reverse stockinette. Okay. So here, look at the difference between reverse stockinette and garter. Okay, look at garter. So when we want to count garter rows, we have to count them in groups of 2. Well, we don't have to, it's just easier. So you see how we have we have the tops and the bottoms? This is one garter ridge, so we count that as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, so each garter ridge is considered 2 rows, and this is why. Because when you pull it open, okay, when you pull it open, you can see the knit row, all right? That's why when we count the garter, we count it as 2, because I'm automatically counting the purl row and I'm counting the knit row at the same time. So this is 2, 4, 6, okay? All right, so let's take a look at some items that have already been knit, and let's read the stitches. So this is one of Martha's. I was wearing it and I took it off so you could see. This is one of Martha's cowls, and I apologize for not getting the name of it in advance. Like I said, I was wearing it, so I didn't think about getting the name of it. But it starts up here, okay? It starts at the top, and then, let's see. Did she do a garter ridge? No. All right, it starts up here and then it gets bigger. So when you take a look at this, you can kind of say, all right, well, if I look at this, I know that this is her spine, the spine of the knit, and I can tell that there are increases on each side. I can tell it's done all in garter because this is only garter work, but there are still knit 2s together. This is called eyelet work, okay? So then, hey, Carla, it's good to see you, honey. What else do we have? Oh, and we have bobbles. Bobbles. Now, I can't tell you that I can see every single stitch, because when you do a bobble, it's like you knit in the loop, you knit in the stitch, you yarn over, you knit in the same stitch, you yarn over, you knit in the same stitch, whatever it says. Then when you turn around, you purl it. Then you turn it around and you knit it. Then you turn it around and you purl it. And then you kind of bind it all off. And then you have this awesome little bobble. That's how you do a bobble. So there's other methods, but that's the one I typically see. Then, as we get toward the bottom, she has this gorgeous edge. Well, that's an I-cord bind off. And look, it gives it just a little bit of heft, so it's firm. And when you wear it, see, look how straight it is. It's quite beautiful. Let's look at another piece of Martha's. This is the Lysanthius wrap. And a different stitch on this is a center double decrease, okay? So we have to get rid of, see how pointed that is? It's lovely. Well, in order to get that point, we have to decrease 2 at a time. It looks like every other row. So that's a center double decrease. Look, she has eyelet work that's quite beautiful. And when you do those double decreases, do you see how you have this interesting shape that occurs? It's quite beautiful. Hey, Helen, it's good to see you. And Carol, oh my gosh, Carol, I haven't seen you in forever. Okay, now the last thing that we're going to look at before we go to create your own pattern is this cowl from Barocco. And some of you may wonder, well, you know, this twisted rib thing, why is this a deal? Well, if I was a really good knitting teacher, I'd have an example of a regular rib, but I don't. This is a twisted rib, and what happens is you are knitting in the back of the loop. When you knit in the back of the loop, you make the purl tighten up, Okay, so it's quite interesting how this pops up like this. If you were just doing knit one, purl one, it would be beautiful. But a twisted rib where you knit in the back loop makes that rib pop up. All right, and then here, this is reverse stockinette, because if I look on the other side, look, it's just plain stockinette. You can kind of tell how the pattern increases right here, or maybe it decreases. I haven't knit the pattern, so I don't know which way. I think this is increase right here, okay? So you can see, as a matter of fact, if you look, I can probably count on the back side all of the increases, because see how it's wider here and it gets really narrow up here. So it's probably a decrease. We're knitting two together. Okay, last thing, you might have seen the sweater that Pat was wearing, and I said that we designed it together. Well, Pat tends to take pictures of clothing in stores, and she brings it to me and says, I want to knit it. So we look at the pictures that she takes, and then we create the pattern. So I have a friend, Kate, brought this picture in today, and she said, someday I want to knit this poncho. And she took multiple pictures, but this is how I showed her how we would create the pattern. When you look at this, I can tell that this is a 2x2 rib because it's knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. Probably because of how, there was another picture of her hand. I can tell it was probably a fingering weight yarn or a sport weight yarn. So that would kind of give us an idea of how many stitches we were going to have to create, because that's already our gauge if we did it like maybe on a 6. But look at this. Do you see how the first maybe 1.5 inches is done in knit 2, purl 2 all the way across? Okay. But then after that, look how the pattern would change. Then we would just do knits because this is stockinette, okay? So we're doing stockinette here, so that's just knitting and purling on the back side because this is a flat piece. And then it's still knit 2, purl 2 all the way across. And then we're changing to stockinette again. Well, let's say we have done those 3 rows, because you can pretty much tell that's 3 rows of stockinette. I'm going to say 3 rows. I'm looking on my phone, so I'm having a hard time. Let's see, 1, 2, yeah, it is. It's 3 rows of stockinette. So then on this side, when we come back here, this is reverse stockinette. So we're going to be purling on the right side. Then when we get to here, we're still going to keep up with our regular pattern of knit 2, purl 2, and then we're going to be purling over here. Now, it changes a little bit up here. Do you see how this was the reverse stockinette? Then we did stockinette, and oh, look, there's the ribbing again. It's a gorgeous sweater. It's going to take a lot of patterning when we write the pattern. But look at this. Isn't this wonderful? Years ago, when I was teaching math, the person that taught me how to teach math said you shouldn't enter a room and look at everything in terms of a math lesson. That's how fast you should be able to think. Well, now I don't think about math lessons anymore. I think about how to recreate a pattern. So when I'm sitting, and I gave this example earlier, I said I'm sitting in church and somebody will have a machine knit sweater on, and I'm thinking, okay, I know that pattern and I can see what it is. So that tells you that I should have been paying more attention, and I have to go back. But anyway, so look at this. Isn't it lovely? This is not a difficult pattern to recreate. Lots of stitches, because like I said, it's probably in fingering or sport weight, but this is going to be a gorgeous pattern once we write it up. Okay, so I so appreciate I had about 11 people watching today. It just astounds me that y'all pop in. I thank you so very much. If you have questions about reading your stitches or maybe recreating a pattern that you've seen, take really good pictures and we can do this. It's not that you don't want to spend what they're charging, because chances are it's going to cost you probably a little bit more to knit it yourself than what they are selling it for. But to me, it's all about, it's like a puzzle or a mystery, and it's all about solving the mystery and being able to recreate this wonderful thing. And she did tell me that this picture was probably 3 or 4 years old, so we're good to go. Y'all have a great day. Enjoy this weather. There's no more snow. And keep on knitting and crocheting, everybody. Hi, Ann. Hi, Gail. Mary Ellen. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.